The truth hits differently when it's spoken out loud. I should know. For 32 years, I lived in the shadow of my twin sister, convincing myself that the favoritism was all in my head. But sometimes, all it takes is one unguarded moment, one slip of the tongue, to shatter the careful lies we build around ourselves. Rebecca has always been the reliable one, my father said, not realizing I was standing in the doorway. Rachel just doesn't have that same drive. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I froze, the gift bag I was carrying suddenly heavy in my hands. It was their 65th birthday, and I'd spent weeks planning the perfect weekend at Cannon Beach. I'd rented the oceanfront house, coordinated with Rebecca, and even scheduled their favorite activities. And here they were, my own parents, casually dismissing me while praising my twin sister, who, by the way, hadn't even arrived yet. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I've always been the other twin. That's how people see me in relation to Rebecca. We're identical in appearance. Same chestnut hair, same amber eyes, same smile that crinkles slightly more on the left. But that's where the similarities end. Rebecca became a surgeon, married Eric, had 2 picture-perfect children, and lives in a sprawling house in West Linn. Meanwhile, I chose a different path. After college, I joined a tech startup in downtown Portland. I live in a modern apartment with my partner, Sophia. No kids, no white picket fence, just a life that makes me happy, or at least that's what I tell myself. Growing up in our Chinese-American household in Lake Oswego, the pattern was always the same. Rebecca got the praise, I got the criticism. Rebecca's A+ was celebrated. My A was questioned with, why not an A+? When Rebecca decided to become a doctor, our parents beamed with pride. When I chose tech, they asked if I'd considered accounting instead, something more stable for a woman. The favoritism was subtle but constant. Our family photo album tells the story. Pages of Rebecca's dance recitals, science fair wins, and graduation. My achievements occupy maybe 3 pages total. I used to flip through it as a teenager, wondering what made her so special and me so forgettable. Despite all this, I maintained a relationship with my parents. I called weekly. I visited monthly. I helped them navigate their finances after they closed the family restaurant 5 years ago. I never mentioned how much their favoritism hurt me. What would be the point? In Chinese culture, respect for parents is paramount. Confrontation isn't our way. Rachel? Is that you? My mother's voice pulled me back to the present, standing in the doorway of the beach house, gift bag in hand. I plastered on a smile. Happy birthday, Mom. She embraced me, her small frame still strong despite her age. Come in, come in. Your father is just watching the television. No mention of what I'd overheard. No awareness of the knife they'd just twisted deeper. The beach house was exactly as pictured online. Spacious living room with panoramic ocean views, 4 bedrooms, a gourmet kitchen. Perfect for the family weekend I'd planned. I'd spent 3 months' worth of savings on it, wanting everything to be special for them. This place must be expensive, my father commented, not bothering to get up from the sofa. Rebecca said you insisted on paying for everything. You shouldn't waste money like that. I bit my tongue. If only they knew that I wasn't wasting money. I was spending a fraction of what I'd made growing their retirement fund over the past 5 years. It had started innocently enough. After the restaurant failed, they were in financial trouble. Their retirement savings were minimal, and at 60, they were facing the prospect of working well into their 70s. That's when I stepped in. I took their modest savings and, using my tech industry knowledge and connections, invested in several promising startups. The returns had been exceptional, turning their $50,000 into nearly $600,000. But I never told them. I simply set up automatic deposits into their account each month, letting them believe it was the returns from safe investments I'd recommended. They thought they were getting by on careful budgeting and modest investment returns. In reality, I was the reason they could afford to retire at all. Rebecca knew nothing about this arrangement. As far as she was concerned, our parents were fine financially. She sent them expensive gifts on birthdays and holidays, took them on day trips, and had them over for elaborate dinners. But when it came to actual financial support, that was all me, the supposedly less reliable twin. "Where should I put my bags?" I asked, changing the subject. "Oh, you and Sophia can take the small bedroom at the end of the hall," my mother said, waving vaguely. "We're saving the master suite for Rebecca and Eric. You know Eric needs his space." Of course they were. Never mind that Sophia and I were paying for the entire weekend. Never mind that Rebecca and Eric wouldn't arrive until tomorrow because Eric had a very important golf game he couldn't miss. "Great," I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. "When does Rebecca get here tomorrow?" "Around noon, I think. She's bringing the children too." Isn't that wonderful? We weren't expecting them, but she thought it would be nice for us to have the whole family together. I froze. The whole family? But this was supposed to be an adults-only weekend. We'd discussed this months ago. The house was big, but not big enough for 2 unexpected children. And the activities I'd planned, wine tasting, a sunset dinner cruise, weren't child-appropriate. "I didn't know the kids were coming," I managed. My father looked up from the TV. "Is that a problem?" His tone suggested it better not be. "No, of course not," I lied. "It's just, I planned some adults-only activities. I'll need to make some adjustments." My mother patted my arm. "You always worry too much, Rachel. Rebecca will figure it out. She's so good at making things work." There it was again. That subtle comparison, that implied deficiency on my part. Sophia arrived an hour later, her dark curls damp from the light rain that had started outside. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "Everything okay?" she whispered as she hugged me. "Fine," I lied, then amended when she raised an eyebrow. "I'll tell you later." Dinner that night was takeout from a local seafood place, another expense I covered without comment. My parents talked excitedly about seeing Rebecca and the grandchildren tomorrow, barely acknowledging Sophia's questions about their health or my mentions of the activities I'd planned. "I hope the weather improves for the boat trip," I ventured, during a lull in the conversation. "Boat trip?" My mother looked confused. "The sunset dinner cruise I booked? For tomorrow night?" I reminded her. "I told you about it when we spoke last week." "Oh, right," she said, not sounding convinced. "Well, I don't think that will work with the children. Maybe you can cancel it?" I felt my chest tighten. The non-refundable dinner cruise had cost over $500. "I'll see what I can do," I managed. Later, in the small bedroom, which had twin beds instead of the queen I'd specifically requested when booking, Sophia listened as I recounted what I'd overheard earlier. "That's awful, Rach," she said, her dark eyes flashing with anger. "Why do you keep putting yourself through this?" It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself countless times. "They're my parents," I said, as if that explained everything. "Yes, but they treat you like you're second best. They don't appreciate everything you do for them. They don't even know you're funding their retirement." I sighed. "It's not about recognition. I don't need them to thank me or praise me. I trailed off, not sure how to explain the complicated mix of duty, love, and hope that kept me tethered to my family. "You just want them to love you as much as they love Rebecca," Sophia finished softly. I nodded, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "Is that so much to ask?" Sophia pulled me into her arms. No, babe, it's not. The next morning, I woke early and went for a run along the beach, trying to clear my head. The Oregon coast was misty, the waves crashing against the shore in a steady rhythm that matched my footfalls. I loved this place, its wildness, its beauty, its indifference to human concerns. By the time I returned to the house, everyone was up. My mother was preparing breakfast, my father was reading the newspaper, and Sophia was helping set the table. "There you are," my mother said. "Rebecca called. They'll be here by 11, earlier than expected. Isn't that wonderful?" "Great," I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. "I'll shower and help with breakfast." But when I emerged from the bathroom, I found my mother had transformed the kitchen. She'd made Rebecca's favorite dishes, an elaborate spread that went far beyond the simple breakfast we'd planned. "Wow," I said, surveying the feast. "You went all out." "Well, you know how Rebecca loves my cooking," my mother said proudly. "And the children are growing so fast. They need proper food." I nodded, swallowing the hurt. When was the last time my mother had cooked my favorite dishes? I couldn't remember. Rebecca arrived in a flurry of activity, her husband Eric carrying too many bags, her children immediately running through the house with excited squeals, Rebecca herself embracing our parents like she hadn't seen them in years. It had been 2 weeks. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Rachel," she exclaimed when she saw me, embracing me in a cloud of expensive perfume. "This place is amazing. How did you find it?" "Research," I said simply, returning her hug. Despite everything, I loved my sister. Our relationship was complicated, competitive, on her end, resigned on mine. But she was still my twin, still part of me in a way no one else could be. "And you must be Sophia," Rebecca said, turning to my partner with a bright smile. "I've heard so much about you." Sophia returned the smile, ever gracious. "Likewise, it's nice to finally meet after all this time." There was an awkward pause. Rebecca and Eric had been together for 12 years, married for 10. Sophia and I had been together for 4, and this was the first time Rebecca was meeting her. Somehow, our visits to Portland never coincided. "Well, isn't this nice? All of us together," my mother said, breaking the silence. "Rebecca, I made your favorites for brunch, and there are cookies for the children." As we settled around the table, the dynamic was painfully clear. My parents fawned over Rebecca and the children, engaged politely but minimally with Eric, and barely acknowledged Sophia or me except to ask us to pass dishes or refill drinks. "So, Rachel," Eric said during a lull in the conversation, "Rebecca tells me you're doing well at that tech company. Making good money now?" I shifted uncomfortably. "Innovate Tech is doing well, yes. She got promoted to Director of Product Development last year," Sophia added, a note of pride in her voice. My father looked up, briefly interested. "Director? That's impressive." Before I could respond, Rebecca jumped in. "Eric just made partner at his law firm, youngest partner in the firm's history." And just like that, the conversation shifted back to Rebecca's family, my promotion forgotten. After brunch, I announced the afternoon activity, a private glass-blowing class I'd arranged at a local studio. It was something my parents had mentioned, wanting to try, and I'd spent weeks finding the right instructor who could accommodate beginners. "Oh," my mother said, looking uncertain. "I don't know if that's suitable for the children." "I actually arranged for a babysitter to come to the house," I explained, "a local college student with excellent references. She can watch the kids while we do the class." Rebecca frowned. "I'm not comfortable leaving my children with a stranger, Rachel." "She's not a stranger to me. I interviewed her via video call and did a background check. She's studying childhood education and has years of babysitting experience." Eric shook his head. "No, I think Rebecca's right. We should do something all together. I felt my carefully planned weekend slipping away. The non-refundable glass-blowing class had cost nearly $1,000 for the 6 adults. Maybe you should have consulted us before making all these plans, my father said, his tone suggesting I'd been presumptuous. I took a deep breath, feeling Sophia's hand on my arm, a silent show of support. I did consult you, Dad. I sent emails detailing the itinerary. Mom and I discussed it on the phone multiple times. My mother looked confused. Did we? I don't recall discussing specific activities. Before I could respond, Rebecca stepped in. It's fine. Rachel clearly put a lot of thought into this. But things change, plans adjust. That's life. She turned to our parents. Why don't we take a drive down the coast instead? The kids would love to see the lighthouse. And just like that, my carefully planned activity was dismissed, replaced by Rebecca's impromptu suggestion. No one seemed to care about the lost money or the effort I'd put into the arrangements. As everyone moved to get ready for the lighthouse excursion, I remained at the table, a hollow feeling expanding in my chest. You okay? Sophia asked quietly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We don't have to go with them, she suggested. We could do our own thing this afternoon. It was tempting, but I knew that would only give my parents more ammunition. No, we'll go, but I need a minute. I stepped outside onto the deck, breathing in the salt air. The ocean stretched out before me, vast and indifferent. I pulled out my phone and canceled the dinner cruise, accepting the financial loss. Then I texted the babysitter to let her know her services wouldn't be needed after all. As I stood there, I found myself wondering why I kept doing this, putting myself in situations where I would inevitably be hurt, overlooked, diminished. What was I hoping for? That suddenly, after 32 years, my parents would see me? Really see me? And what would happen if they knew the truth? That their comfortable retirement, their monthly income, their financial security, all of it rested on my shoulders. Would it change anything? Or would they find a way to credit Rebecca for that, too? I didn't know. But standing there, watching the waves crash against the shore, I felt something shift inside me. A resignation, perhaps. Or maybe the first stirrings of something else. A realization that I deserved better than constantly seeking approval from people who were constitutionally incapable of giving it to me. The lighthouse trip was predictably chaotic. Rebecca's children were cranky, the weather turned drizzly, and the gift shop was closed for renovation, much to my mother's disappointment. Through it all, I maintained a pleasant demeanor, playing the role I'd perfected over decades: supportive daughter, accommodating sister, reliable but ultimately forgettable Rachel. But something had changed. I was watching myself play this role, now observing from a distance. And what I saw made me profoundly sad. That evening, as we all gathered in the living room after dinner, pizza ordered by Eric, paid for by me, my father brought up the topic of their upcoming anniversary trip. To Hawaii, a surprise gift from Rebecca, apparently. We've always wanted to go to Hawaii, my mother gushed. Rebecca remembered we talked about it years ago. Isn't she thoughtful? I felt a familiar pang. I'd offered to send them to Hawaii for their 60th anniversary 5 years ago. They'd declined, saying it was too extravagant, and they wouldn't feel comfortable accepting such an expensive gift from me. When are you going? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Next month, my father replied. Rebecca got us a great deal through her friend who works in travel. I nodded, a strange feeling settling over me. Next month's retirement fund transfer was scheduled to be the largest yet, $7,500 to cover some significant property taxes on their house. Would they connect those dots? Probably not. They never questioned where the money came from, just accepted it as their due. As the evening wore on, Rebecca dominated the conversation as usual, talking about her children's achievements, Eric's successful cases, her own surgical breakthroughs. Our parents hung on every word, interjecting with proud comments and questions. Sophia and I sat quietly, occasionally exchanging glances that spoke volumes. Around 9, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from the investment platform I used to manage my parents' retirement fund. An unexpected market fluctuation had occurred, requiring my immediate attention. I excused myself and stepped into the bedroom to handle it. 15 minutes later, crisis averted, I returned to find the conversation had somehow turned to finances. Just don't understand how people our age are supposed to survive, my father was saying. If it weren't for Rachel's investment advice, we'd probably still be working. I froze in the doorway, unsure if I'd heard correctly. What investment advice? Rebecca asked, glancing my way. My mother waved a hand dismissively. Oh, Rachel. Helped us set up some accounts after the restaurant closed. Nothing fancy, just safe, reliable investments. But they've done surprisingly well. Surprisingly well? Rebecca raised an eyebrow. How well? My father shrugged. Well enough that we can live comfortably. Take trips like this Hawaii one. I felt my heart rate accelerate. This was getting dangerously close to territory I wasn't prepared to discuss. What kind of returns are you getting? Eric asked, his lawyer's curiosity piqued. The market hasn't been that great for safe investments lately. My parents looked at each other, then at me. Rachel handles all that, my father said. We just get the monthly deposits. All eyes turned to me standing in the doorway. I felt like a deer caught in headlights. It's nothing special, I said, aiming for nonchalance. Just diversified. Investments, mostly index funds. Eric frowned. Index funds don't generate the kind of regular monthly income you'd need for a comfortable retirement, especially starting from scratch 5 years ago. Well, Rachel must have done something right, my mother said, patting the sofa beside her. Come sit, dear. Tell everyone your investment secrets. I moved to the sofa on autopilot, my mind racing. This wasn't how I'd planned to have this conversation, if I'd planned to have it at all. There's no secret, I said carefully. I just found some opportunities that worked out well. Rebecca was watching me intently, a slight crease between her brows. She'd always been able to tell when I was hiding something. What kind of opportunities? She pressed. I glanced at Sophia, who gave me an encouraging nod. Maybe it was time for the truth. I invested in some tech startups, I admitted. Companies I had insider knowledge about through my work at Innovate Tech. Insider knowledge? Eric's eyebrows shot up. That sounds potentially illegal. Not illegal, I clarified quickly. I meant I understand the tech industry. I can evaluate which startups have potential better than most financial advisors. My father was leaning forward now, suddenly interested. And these startups, they're what's funding our retirement. I took a deep breath, feeling Sophia's hand on my arm, a silent show of support. I did consult you, Dad. I sent emails detailing the itinerary. Mom and I discussed it on the phone multiple times. My mother looked confused. Did we? I don't recall discussing specific activities. Before I could respond, Rebecca stepped in. It's fine. Rachel clearly put a lot of thought into this. But things change. Plans adjust. That's life. She turned to our parents. Why don't we take a drive? Down the coast instead? The kids would love to see the lighthouse. And just like that, my carefully planned activity was dismissed, replaced by Rebecca's impromptu suggestion. No one seemed to care about the lost money or the effort I'd put into the arrangements. As everyone moved to get ready for the lighthouse excursion, I remained at the table, a hollow feeling expanding in my chest. You okay? Sophia asked quietly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We don't have to go with them, she suggested. We could do our own thing this afternoon. It was tempting, but I knew that would only give my parents more ammunition. No, we'll go, but I need a minute. I stepped outside onto the deck, breathing in the salt air. The ocean stretched out before me, vast and indifferent. I pulled out my phone and canceled the dinner cruise, accepting the financial loss. Then I texted the babysitter to let her know her services wouldn't be needed after all. As I stood there, I found myself wondering why I kept doing this, putting myself in situations where I would inevitably be hurt, overlooked, diminished. What was I hoping for? That suddenly, after 32 years, my parents would see me? Really see me? And what would happen if they knew the truth? That their comfortable retirement, their monthly income, their financial security, all of it rested on my shoulders. Would it change anything? Or would they find a way to credit Rebecca for that, too? I didn't know. But standing there, watching the waves crash against the shore, I felt something shift inside me. A resignation, perhaps. Or maybe the first stirrings of something else. A realization that I deserved better than constantly seeking approval from people who were constitutionally incapable of giving it to me. The lighthouse trip was predictably chaotic. Rebecca's children were cranky, the weather turned drizzly, and the gift shop was closed for renovation, much to my mother's disappointment. Through it all, I maintained a pleasant demeanor, playing the role I'd perfected over decades: supportive daughter, accommodating sister, reliable but ultimately forgettable Rachel. But something had changed. I was watching myself play this role, now observing from a distance. And what I saw made me profoundly sad. That evening, as we all gathered in the living room after dinner, pizza ordered by Eric, paid for by me, my father brought up the topic of their upcoming anniversary trip to Hawaii. A surprise gift from Rebecca, apparently. "We've always wanted to go to Hawaii," my mother gushed. "Rebecca remembered we talked about it years ago. Isn't she thoughtful?" I felt a familiar pang. I'd offered to send them to Hawaii for their 60th anniversary 5 years ago. They'd declined, saying it was too extravagant and they wouldn't feel comfortable accepting such an expensive gift from me. "When are you going?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Next month," my father replied. "Rebecca got us a great deal through her friend who works in travel." I nodded, a strange feeling settling over me. Next month's retirement fund transfer was scheduled to be the largest yet, $7,500 to cover some significant property taxes on their house. Would they connect those dots? Probably not. They never questioned where the money came from, just accepted it as their due. As the evening wore on, Rebecca dominated the conversation as usual, talking about her children's achievements, Eric's successful cases, her own surgical breakthroughs. Our parents hung on every word, interjecting with proud comments and questions. Sophia and I sat quietly, occasionally exchanging glances that spoke volumes. Around 9, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from the investment platform I used to manage my parents' retirement fund. An unexpected market fluctuation had occurred, requiring my immediate attention. I excused myself and stepped into the bedroom to handle it. 15 minutes later, crisis averted, I returned to find the conversation had somehow turned to finances. "Just don't understand how people our age are supposed to survive," my father was saying. "If it weren't for Rachel's investment advice, we'd probably still be working." I froze in the doorway, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "What investment advice?" Rebecca asked, glancing my way. My mother waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, Rachel. Helped us set up some accounts after the restaurant closed. Nothing fancy, just safe, reliable investments. But they've done surprisingly well." "Surprisingly well?" Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "How well?" My father shrugged. "Well enough that we can live comfortably, take trips like this Hawaii one." I felt my heart rate accelerate. This was getting dangerously close to territory I wasn't prepared to discuss. "What kind of returns are you getting?" Eric asked. His lawyer's curiosity piqued. "The market hasn't been that great for safe investments lately." My parents looked at each other, then at me. "Rachel handles all that," my father said. "We just get the monthly deposits." All eyes turned to me, standing in the doorway. I felt like a deer caught in headlights. "It's nothing special," I said, aiming for nonchalance. "Just diversified investments, mostly index funds." Eric frowned. "Index funds don't generate the kind of regular monthly income you'd need for a comfortable retirement, especially starting from scratch 5 years ago." "Well, Rachel must have done something right," my mother said, patting the sofa beside her. "Come sit, dear. Tell everyone your investment secrets." I moved to the sofa on autopilot, my mind racing. This wasn't how I'd planned to have this conversation, if I'd planned to have it at all. "There's no secret," I said carefully. "I just found some opportunities that worked out well." Rebecca was watching me intently, a slight crease between her brows. She'd always been able to tell when I was hiding something. "What kind of opportunities?" she pressed. I glanced at Sophia, who gave me an encouraging nod. Maybe it was time for the truth. "I invested in some tech startups," I admitted. "Companies I had insider knowledge about through my work at Innovate Tech." "Insider knowledge?" Eric's eyebrows shot up. "That sounds potentially illegal." "Not illegal," I clarified quickly. "I meant I understand the tech industry. I can evaluate which startups have potential better than most financial advisors." My father was leaning forward now, suddenly interested. "And these startups, they're what's funding our retirement." I took a deep breath. "Yes. I took your initial savings and multiplied it by investing strategically in emerging technologies. The monthly deposits you receive come from those investments." There was a moment of stunned silence. "How much?" Rebecca asked quietly. "How much are these investments worth now?" I met her gaze, feeling strangely calm. "About $600,000, give or take." My mother gasped. My father's mouth fell open. Eric whistled low. "600,000? My father repeated incredulously. "From our 50,000? I nodded. "But that's impossible," my mother said. "No safe investment could grow that much in 5 years." "They weren't entirely safe investments," I admitted. "They were calculated risks. Risks I was prepared to cover personally if they didn't pan out." The room fell silent again as they processed this information. "You were going to cover our losses yourself?" my father asked, his voice uncharacteristically soft. I shrugged. "Of course, I wouldn't gamble with your retirement security." "But why didn't you tell us?" my mother asked, genuinely puzzled. And there it was, the question I'd been dreading. Why hadn't I told them? The answer was complicated, tied up in years of feeling secondary, of seeking approval and never quite finding it. "I didn't think you'd believe me," I said finally, the closest approximation to the truth I could manage in that moment, and I wanted to be sure it would work before I said anything. Rebecca was staring at me, a strange expression on her face. "You've been supporting our parents' entire retirement? All this time?" I met her gaze steadily. "Yes." "And you never said anything? Never took credit?" I shook my head. "Why not?" she demanded, an edge to her voice I couldn't quite interpret. Before I could answer, my father spoke, his voice thick with an emotion I rarely heard from him. "Rachel, I don't know what to say. This is extraordinary." My mother reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "We had no idea. All these years we thought—" She trailed off, but I knew what she meant. They thought I was the less successful twin, the less reliable one, the one who couldn't quite measure up. "All these years," my father said slowly, "we've been living on your generosity, and we didn't even know it." The room felt charged with a strange energy, confusion, revelation, perhaps even the first stirrings of remorse. And as I sat there, surrounded by my family, Yet feeling oddly apart from them, I realized something important. This revelation wouldn't magically fix decades of favoritism. It wouldn't suddenly make my parents see me differently or value me equally to Rebecca. That kind of deep-seated pattern didn't change overnight, if it changed at all. But maybe that was okay. Maybe I didn't need their validation anymore. I looked at Sophia, her gaze unwavering and supportive. I thought about my life in Portland, my satisfying career, our cozy apartment, our friends who appreciated me for exactly who I was. I thought about the choices I'd made, the path I'd forged, different from the one my family had expected or valued, but right for me. And for the first time, I wondered if perhaps I had been seeking approval from the wrong people all along. The silence that followed my revelation seemed to stretch on forever. Outside, the waves crashed against the Oregon shore, filling the awkward void with their rhythmic roar. My father sat with his hand covering his mouth, still processing what he'd just learned. My mother's eyes darted between me and Rebecca, perhaps searching for how to react. Rebecca stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between shock and something else. Resentment? Admiration? I couldn't tell. Eric cleared his throat. $600,000, he repeated, the lawyer in him unable to let go of the numbers. From 50,000. That's what, 1,000% return? More like 1,200%, I corrected quietly. Eric whistled again. And it's all legal? I felt a flash of irritation. Of course it's legal. I didn't rob a bank, Eric. I made smart investments. Smart is an understatement, Rebecca muttered. She looked at our parents. Did you have any idea? Any at all? They both shook their heads. My mother's hand was still clutching mine, but it felt performative now, like she was playing the role of the grateful parent without fully understanding what it meant. I thought, my father began, then paused to clear his throat. I always thought those monthly deposits were just from the original investments we had. You know, steady returns from conservative funds. I smiled thinly. Those would have given you about $200 a month, Dad. Not the $3,000 you've been receiving. His eyes widened. 3,000? I thought it was closer to 2. And there it was. They didn't even know how much they were getting each month. They'd just assumed the money would always be there, never questioning where it came from or if it would continue. 3,000 for the past 2 years, I confirmed. I increased it when the tech stocks took off. My mother's grip on my hand tightened. But Rachel, sweetheart, why wouldn't you tell us this? We could have thanked you properly. I extricated my hand gently. That wasn't necessary. You're my parents. I wanted to help. But this is, my father gestured vaguely, extraordinary. Above and beyond what any child should do for their parents. Rebecca stood up abruptly. I need some air. She headed for the deck, sliding the glass door shut behind her with more force than necessary. Eric gave an apologetic smile. She's just surprised. We all are. My parents nodded, but they were still looking at me like I was a stranger who had suddenly appeared in their living room. In a way, I supposed I was. The daughter they thought they knew, reliable but unremarkable Rachel, had vanished, replaced by someone who had quietly managed to secure their entire financial future. I should check on the children, my mother said suddenly, rising from the couch. It was her standard escape tactic when emotional situations became too uncomfortable. They're asleep, Mom, I reminded her. Have been for an hour. Still, she insisted, already moving toward the stairs. They might need water or something. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Without my mother or Rebecca to buffer the conversation, he seemed unsure how to proceed. Well, he said finally, this is certainly a surprise. Sophia, who had been silent throughout the revelation, stood up. I'm going to make some tea. Anyone want some? Eric and my father both declined. I gave her a grateful look as she headed to the kitchen, understanding that she was giving me space for this conversation. "Dad," I said once she was gone, "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry. You and Mom had been through enough with the restaurant closing." He nodded, seemingly relieved to have a practical explanation he could latch onto. "That makes sense. Very considerate of you, but it wasn't the whole truth, and some reckless part of me wanted to push further, to see if he could truly understand. Also," I continued, my heart pounding, "I wasn't sure you'd believe I could do it. Successfully, I mean." His face fell, slightly. "What? Why wouldn't we believe in you?" I held his gaze. "Because you never have before." The words hung in the air between us, simple but devastating in their truth. My father blinked, genuine confusion crossing his features. "That's not true, Rachel. Of course we believe in you. We've always been proud of you." "Have you?" I asked quietly. "Because from where I'm sitting, it's always been Rebecca you've been proud of. Rebecca the surgeon. Rebecca with the perfect family. Rebecca who can do no wrong." Eric shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe I should give you two some privacy." "No," I said firmly. "Stay, Eric. Your family too, and this involves all of us." My father's expression hardened. "I don't know where this is coming from, Rachel. Your mother and I have always treated you and your sister exactly the same." I couldn't help it. I laughed. A short, bitter sound that seemed to surprise even myself. "Dad, you've never treated us the same. Not once in our entire lives." "That's not fair," he protested. "We've always... When I got accepted to Stanford with a scholarship, you said, 'That's nice.' But did you hear Rebecca got into Harvard? When I bought my first apartment, you asked why it wasn't in a better neighborhood. When I joined Innovate Tech, you suggested I look for something more stable. But when Rebecca does anything at all, it's cause for celebration." My father looked genuinely perplexed. "That's not how it was." "Yes, it was. It is. Just this morning, you told Mom that Rebecca has always been the reliable one and that I don't have the same drive. I heard you." He had the decency to look embarrassed. "You misunderstood. I was just saying..." "I know exactly what you were saying, Dad. What you've been saying my whole life. That somehow, despite being identical twins, Rebecca got all the good qualities and I'm just... lacking." Eric stood up abruptly. "I'm definitely going to check on Rebecca." He retreated to the deck, leaving my father and me alone. "Rachel," my father said, his voice softer now, "I never meant to make you feel that way." "But you did," I replied. "You and Mom both. And do you know what's ironic? While you've been praising Rebecca for being the reliable one, I'm the one who's been supporting your retirement. I'm the one who made sure you could stop working. I'm the one who's been sending you $3,000 every month without ever expecting anything in return. Not even acknowledgement." My father looked stricken. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because I love you and Mom, despite everything. But I need you to understand something. I'm not less than Rebecca. I never was. I just chose a different path." The sliding door opened, and Rebecca stepped back in, her expression unreadable. Behind her, the ocean stretched dark and vast, reflecting the scattered lights from houses along the shoreline. "You're not less than me," she said quietly, having obviously overheard. "You never were." I turned to face my twin, my mirror image who somehow always seemed to shine brighter in our parents' eyes. "That's not how it feels, Becca." She crossed, her arms defensive. "Well, that's not my fault, is it? I didn't ask them to favor me." "No, you didn't," I acknowledged. "But you never did anything to stop it either." Rebecca's eyes flashed. What was I supposed to do? Turn down their praise? Refuse their support? Say no thanks, give it to Rachel instead? You could have noticed, I said simply. You could have said something when they compared us. You could have included me more, instead of creating this perfect family bubble that I was never quite invited into. She shook her head. That's not fair. You've always been invited. You're the one who stayed away. Because every time I came around, it was the Rebecca show. Your accomplishments, your children, your life, while mine was treated as an afterthought. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To always be the other one? The twin who didn't quite measure up? My voice had risen, and I realized I was trembling. Years of suppressed feelings were finally breaking through, like a dam cracking under too much pressure. Rebecca's face softened slightly. I didn't know you felt that way. How could you not know? I demanded. It's been this way our entire lives. My father cleared his throat. Girls, this isn't the time or place. It's exactly the time and place. I cut him off. Because for once, you're both going to listen to me. The authority in my voice seemed to surprise them. Rebecca sat down on the arm of the sofa, and my father leaned back, his eyes wide. I have built a good life, I continued, more measured. Now, a life I'm proud of. I have a partner who loves me for exactly who I am. I have a career where I'm respected and valued. I make enough money to live comfortably and help the people I care about. But somehow, in this family, none of that has ever been enough. That's not true, my father protested weakly. It is true, I insisted. And you know what the worst part is? I convinced myself it didn't matter, that I could just keep trying harder, giving more, and eventually you'd see me. Really see me. But tonight I realized something. I've been chasing validation from people who are constitutionally incapable of giving it to me. Rebecca flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's harsh, Rachel. Maybe, I acknowledged, but it's how I feel. And for once, I'm not going to pretend otherwise. The deck door slid open again, and Sophia stepped in, followed by my mother. One look at our faces told them they'd walked into a tense situation. What's going on? My mother asked, her voice high and nervous. Rachel thinks we favor Rebecca, my father said bluntly. My mother's eyes widened. What? That's ridiculous. Is it, Mom? I asked quietly. You don't think there's any truth to that at all? She looked around the room, searching for support. We love you both equally. We always have. Loving equally isn't the same as treating equally, I pointed out. And it's certainly not the same as respecting equally. My mother turned to Rebecca, a reflexive action that spoke volumes. Rebecca, tell your sister that this isn't true. I laughed humorlessly. See? Even now you're looking to her to fix this, to tell me I'm wrong. Because Rebecca is the authority, the one whose opinion matters. My mother paled. That's not what I meant. No, but it's what you did, I said. It's what you've always done. Sophia moved to stand beside me, a silent show of support. Her presence gave me strength, reminding me that I wasn't alone, regardless of what happened with my family. I think, she said gently, that Rachel is trying to express something she's felt for a long time. Maybe instead of being defensive, you could try to listen? My mother bristled. This is a family matter. No offense, Sophia, but Sophia is family, I said firmly. My family, the family I chose. And unlike some people in this room, she actually sees me for who I am. A heavy silence fell. My father looked stricken, my mother on the verge of tears, Rebecca uncharacteristically subdued. Even Eric, hovering uncertainly by the deck door, seemed at a loss. I think, I said finally, my voice calmer now, that I need some air. Without waiting for a response, I headed for the front door. The night air was cool against my flushed skin as I stepped onto the porch. Behind me, I heard Sophia say something to my family, then the soft click of the door as she joined me outside. "You okay?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me from behind. I leaned back against her, drawing comfort from her warmth. "I don't know. I feel like I just blew up my entire family." "Maybe it needed blowing up," she suggested. "Sometimes things have to break before they can be fixed properly." I turned in her arms to face her. "What if it can't be fixed? What if this is just how they are, and nothing I say will ever change that?" She brushed a strand of hair from my face. "Then you accept it and build your life accordingly." "But Rachel, they might surprise you. You've just dropped a pretty big bomb on them, both the financial revelation and the emotional one. Give them a minute to process." I sighed, resting my forehead against hers. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been this wise. You were just too busy worrying about your family to notice," she teased gently. I smiled despite myself. "Fair point." We stood there for a while, listening to the distant sound of waves and the occasional car passing on the coastal highway. Part of me wanted to pack our bags and leave, drive back to Portland and our normal life, away from the complex dynamics of my family. But I knew that would be running away, and nothing would be resolved. The front door opened, and Rebecca stepped out. She hesitated when she saw us, clearly unsure of her welcome. "Can I talk to you?" she asked tentatively. "Just us?" Sophia squeezed my hand. "I'll go inside. Take your time." Once she'd gone, Rebecca joined me at the porch railing. For a moment, we both stared out at the darkness, neither speaking. Growing up, we'd often been able to communicate, without words, that twin connection people always talk about. But somewhere along the way, we'd lost that, or maybe I just started keeping my thoughts to myself, tired of being the lesser twin. "I didn't know," she said finally, her voice unusually small. "About the money. About how you felt. None of..." Ew, I turned to look at her, my mirror image, yet somehow always the brighter reflection. "How could you not know, Becca? It's been this way forever." She shook her head. "I guess I didn't see it from your perspective. I was busy with my own life, my own struggles." "And I was just the sister who had it easy?" I suggested, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "That's not what I meant." She turned to face me fully. "Rachel, I've always admired you." I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "You what?" "Admired you," she repeated. "You've always known exactly who you are and what you want. You chose your path and stuck to it, even when Mom and Dad didn't understand. You found someone who loves you for exactly who you are. Do you know how rare that is?" I stared at her, speechless. This was not the conversation I'd expected to have. "But you're the successful one," I said finally. "The surgeon with the perfect life." Rebecca let out a laugh that sounded suspiciously close to a sob. "Perfect?" "Rachel, my marriage is hanging by a thread. Eric works constantly, and when he's home, he barely talks to me. The kids are great, but they're also exhausting, and I feel like I'm failing them half the time. And the hospital politics are killing me slowly." I struggled to reconcile this with the image I'd always had of Rebecca's charmed life. "But you always seem so together." "Because that's what everyone expects from me," she said simply. "Mom and Dad put me on this pedestal from day one, and I've been terrified of falling off it ever since. Do you have any idea how exhausting that is?" I shook my head slowly. "I guess I never thought about it that way." "No, why would you? From your perspective, I had it all. The praise, the support, the golden child status. But Rachel, it comes with its own prison. I've spent my entire life trying to live up to their expectations, afraid to ever admit when I'm struggling or unhappy." She leaned against the railing, suddenly looking tired. You know what I envy most about you? Your freedom. You live life on your terms. You chose a career you love, not one that would impress people at cocktail parties. You're with someone because they make you happy, not because they look good on paper. I felt a strange shift inside me, like puzzle pieces rearranging themselves into a new picture. I always thought you had everything I wanted. And I always thought you had everything. I was afraid to reach for, she admitted. Funny, isn't it? Identical twins who couldn't see each other clearly. We fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now, contemplative rather than tense. About the money, she said eventually. That was... I don't even know what to say. Extraordinary doesn't begin to cover it. I shrugged. It wasn't that big a deal. I saw an opportunity and took it. No, it was a big deal, she insisted. You secured our parents' future without ever taking credit. That's not something most people would do. You would have done the same, I said automatically. She shook her head. I'd like to think so, but I'm not sure. And I definitely would have made sure everyone knew about it. She offered a self-deprecating smile. I've never been good at not taking credit. That made me laugh, a genuine sound that felt like the breaking of ice. No, you haven't. Why didn't you tell them, really? She asked, serious again. I considered the question carefully. I guess part of me was afraid they wouldn't believe it was possible, that I could be that successful. And part of me was waiting to see if they'd notice on their own. Notice me, I mean. Not just as your twin, but as my own person. Rebecca nodded slowly. That makes sense. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't notice either. I've been so caught up in my own drama that I missed what was happening with you. It goes both ways, I admitted. I had no idea you were unhappy in your marriage. She grimaced. Well, I'm very good at pretending. Another skill I learned early. Keep up appearances at all costs. I studied my sister's face. Identical. To mine in features, but so different in expression. Had she always carried this weariness behind her eyes? This resignation? How had I missed it? What are we going to do about Mom and Dad? I asked. Rebecca sighed. I don't know. They're not going to change overnight. Probably not at all, to be honest. Probably not, I agreed. But maybe we can change how we deal with them. What do you mean? I turned to face the ocean again, gathering my thoughts. For so long, both of us have been playing the roles they assigned us. You as the golden child, me as the also-ran. What if we just stopped? What if we started being honest with them and with each other? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. That sounds terrifying, she said finally. And necessary. It won't be easy, I warned. Especially for you. They're not going to like seeing you as human, with flaws and struggles. She nodded. I know. But I'm so tired, Rachel. Tired of pretending everything is perfect when it's falling apart. Tired of smiling when I want to scream. On impulse, I reached for her hand. Then stop pretending. Start small if you have to, but start. She squeezed my hand, a gesture that felt both familiar and new. And what about you? What are you going to do? I considered the question. I'm going to stop seeking their approval. I'm going to live my life on my terms and let them catch up if they want to. And I'm going to be more honest with you. I'd like that, she said softly. I've missed you, Rach. The real you, not the polite, distant version you've become. I've missed you too, I admitted, surprised to find it was true. Somewhere beneath the resentment and competition, I still loved my sister, still felt that twin connection, however frayed it had become. The front door opened again and my father stepped out. He looked between us, clearly uncertain of his reception. Your mother's upset, he said, as if that explained his presence. Rebecca and I exchanged a glance. Same old dad, using Mom's emotions to avoid dealing with his own. Mom's always upset when things don't go according to her script, I pointed out. That doesn't mean the conversation is over. My father shifted uncomfortably. Look, Rachel, if this is about the money... It's not about the money, I cut him off. It's about respect, recognition, seeing me for who I am, not who you wish I was. He looked genuinely confused. I do see you. No, Dad, you don't. You see Rebecca's less successful twin. The daughter who didn't become a doctor, who didn't marry a lawyer, who doesn't have children. The one who needs to be guided and corrected because she doesn't know what's best for herself. My father glanced at Rebecca, as if seeking backup. Finding none, he turned back to me. That's not fair, Rachel. We've always wanted what's best for you. What you thought was best, I corrected. Not what actually made me happy. He threw up his hands in frustration. How are we supposed to know what made you happy when you never told us? I told you all the time. You just never listened. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. When I got the job at Innovate Tech, I was ecstatic. It was exactly what I wanted. But all you and Mom could talk about was how unstable tech startups were. When Sophia and I moved in together, I was happier than I'd ever been. But all you could say was, "It's awfully soon." And, "Are you sure about this?" My father looked away, unable to deny the truth of my words. The thing is, Dad, I continued, more gently, I don't need you to approve of my choices. I just need you to respect that they're mine to make. And maybe, just maybe, consider that I might know what I'm doing. Like with the investments, he said quietly. Like with the investments, I agreed. Like with my career. Like with Sophia. He nodded slowly. I hear you. I do. He glanced at Rebecca again. Both of you. Rebecca straightened, surprised to be included. Me? You think I don't see that you're unhappy? He asked softly. A father knows, Rebecca. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. You've always been so independent, so capable. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I'm not, though. Not always. Sometimes I'm just struggling. My father looked suddenly older, the lines in his face deeper in the dim porch light. I've failed you both, haven't I? In different ways, but just as badly. I hadn't expected this. This moment of self-awareness from a man who had always seemed so certain of himself and his role in our lives. You haven't failed us, I said after a moment. You just didn't see us clearly, but you can start now. He nodded, something like determination crossing his features. I can try. He looked between us again. Your mother. This will be harder for her. Change doesn't come easily at our age. We know, Rebecca said. But we're not asking for miracles. Dad, just effort. He extended his hands, one to each of us, a gesture so unexpected it took me a moment to understand what he wanted. When I did, I placed my hand in his, watching as Rebecca did the same. I'm proud of you both, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I don't say it enough. God knows I don't, but I am. Rebecca, you've built a career saving lives. And Rachel, you've apparently built a financial empire right under our noses. He attempted a smile. Not bad for the Chen twins. It wasn't everything, nowhere near the full recognition or understanding I'd been craving. But it was a start, an acknowledgement. That felt like the first crack in a wall that had stood between us for decades. Thanks, Dad, I said softly. Rebecca squeezed his hand. We should go inside. Check on Mom. He nodded, releasing our hands. She'll come around. She loves you both too much not to. As he headed back inside, Rebecca turned to me. You ready? For this? I took a deep breath, considering the question. Was I ready to rebuild my relationship with my parents from the ground up? To establish new boundaries and expectations? To be honest about my feelings even when it was uncomfortable? I don't know, I admitted, but I think it's time to find out. She smiled, a real smile, not the perfect one she wore for photos and family gatherings. Together? I nodded, feeling something heal between us. Not completely, but enough for now. Together. As we headed back inside to face our mother and the rest of the weekend, I felt lighter somehow. The burden of resentment and unmet expectations I'd carried for so long hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted, becoming more manageable. Whatever happened next, whatever bridges we managed to build or failed to cross, I knew one thing for certain. I would never again make myself smaller to fit someone else's idea of who I should be. And that knowledge, that quiet certainty, felt like freedom. Morning arrived with the gentle persistence of coastal light, filtering through the beach house windows and dancing across the wooden floors. I woke before anyone else, my mind still, processing the events of the previous night. For a moment, I lay still, listening to Sophia's steady breathing beside me, trying to gauge how I felt. Lighter, somehow. Raw, certainly. But also strangely calm, as if a storm had passed, leaving... Everything changed but clearer. I slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen, starting the coffee maker as quietly as possible. Through the large windows, I could see the ocean, gray-blue in the early light, waves rolling endlessly toward the shore. There was something reassuring about that constancy, that rhythm that continued regardless of human drama. Couldn't sleep either? I turned to find Rebecca in the doorway, wearing an oversized Stanford sweatshirt that I recognized as one of mine from college. She must have borrowed it years ago and never returned it, a small thing that suddenly seemed symbolic of our relationship. Too much on my mind, I admitted, reaching for another mug. Coffee? She nodded, joining me at the counter. Thanks. We moved around each other with the familiar ease of people who have shared space their entire lives, despite the years of distance that had grown between us. I poured the coffee. She added cream, 2 teaspoons, no sugar, just as she'd always taken it. Mom's still upset, she said after taking her first sip. I heard her crying in their room last night. I felt a twinge of guilt, but pushed it aside. She'll adjust. We all will. Rebecca studied me over the rim of her mug. You seem different this morning. Do I? More certain, less apologetic. I considered this. I guess I am. For the first time. I feel like I'm not waiting for anyone's approval. She nodded slowly. It suits you. We fell into a comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher over the ocean. It was strange how one difficult conversation had shifted something fundamental between us, clearing away pretense and competition to reveal the simple fact of our connection. I was thinking, Rebecca said finally, about what you said last night, about being honest with each other. Yeah? She set down her mug, her expression serious. Eric and I are separating. We've been in counseling for a year, but it's not working. We're going to tell the kids when we get back from this trip. Though she'd hinted at marital troubles the night before, the finality of this statement caught me by surprise. I'm sorry, Becca. That must be really hard. It is, she admitted, but also a relief in a way. We've been pretending for so long, and I'm exhausted by it. She smiled sadly. I didn't want to tell Mom and Dad yet. You know how they'll react. I did know. Our parents put tremendous value on appearances, on the idea of the perfect family. Rebecca's divorce would be seen as a failure, a crack in the carefully constructed image they cherished. When you do tell them, I said, I'll be there if you want. For backup. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by genuine gratitude. I'd like that. Thank you. The sound of footsteps interrupted our moment of connection. My father appeared, already dressed for the day, his expression cautious as he took in the sight of his twin daughters sitting together. "Morning," he said, his voice deliberately casual. "Coffee smells good?" I poured him a cup, black with 1 sugar, the way he'd taken it my entire life. "Sleep well?" "Not particularly," he admitted, accepting the mug with a nod of thanks. "Lot to think about." An understatement if I'd ever heard one. My father had always been a man of few words, especially when it came to emotions. The fact that he was acknowledging the previous night's conversation at all was significant. "Your mother will be down soon," he continued. She needs some time." Rebecca and I exchanged glances. "We understand," I said. "This isn't easy for anyone." My father nodded, looking relieved that we weren't pressing the issue. "What's the plan for today? Are we still doing that glass-blowing thing you mentioned?" The question caught me off guard. After the emotional revelations of the previous night and the disruption to my carefully planned itinerary, I'd assumed the rest of the weekend would be improvised. "I can check if they still have space," I offered. "I canceled yesterday when—" I trailed off, not wanting to remind him of yesterday's dismissal of my plans. "When I was being stubborn," he finished for me, surprising me again. "Call them. It sounds interesting. And the kids can stay with the babysitter you arranged." I blinked, momentarily speechless. This was not the response I'd expected. "Are you sure?" Rebecca asked, clearly as surprised as I was. "What about Mom?" "Your mother will come around," he said firmly. "Rachel put a lot of effort into planning this weekend. The least we can do is participate." It was such a small thing, acknowledging my effort, supporting my plans, but it felt monumental. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, my father was actively validating my choices instead of questioning them. "I'll make the call," I said, trying to keep the emotion from my voice. The glass-blowing studio was able to accommodate us on short notice, and by mid-morning, our group, minus the children who were happily engaged with the college student babysitter, was being introduced to the art of working with molten glass. The instructor, a bearded man named Jasper with forearms like tree trunks, demonstrated the basic techniques with practiced ease. "The key is to keep the glass moving," he explained, rotating a metal rod with a glowing orange blob at the end. "It wants to respond to gravity, to fall. Your job is to control that movement, to work with it rather than against it." I couldn't help but see the metaphor in his words. For years, I'd been fighting against the gravitational pull of my family's expectations, trying to force myself into shapes that didn't fit. Perhaps the secret was not resistance but flow, acknowledging the forces at work but directing them on my own terms. We each took turns at the furnace, guided by Jasper and his assistants. To my surprise, my mother, who had been quiet and withdrawn, all morning showed unexpected aptitude, creating a delicate blue vase that drew admiration from the entire group. "It's beautiful, Mom," I said sincerely as she examined her creation. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time since our confrontation. "Thank you, Rachel." There was a pause, then, "You were right to suggest this. It's therapeutic." It wasn't an apology or an acknowledgement of our larger issues, but it was something. A small olive branch extended across the chasm between us. The rest of the day unfolded with a strange new dynamic. We were all being careful with each other, hyper-aware of old patterns and trying consciously to break them. My father asked questions about my work at Innovate Tech that showed genuine interest, rather than skepticism. Rebecca made space for Sophia in conversations, drawing her in rather than talking over her. My mother remained more reserved, but I caught her watching me sometimes with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between regret and reassessment. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, of falling back into familiar roles, but there was also effort, and that was more than we'd had before. That evening, as we prepared dinner together in the beach house kitchen, Eric pulled me aside. "I want to talk to you about the investment situation," he said, his lawyer, persona firmly in place. I tensed. "What about it?" "Your parents should have proper documentation of what you've done, for tax purposes, for estate planning. It's all very informal right now." I crossed my arms. "I've handled the taxes. There's nothing improper about the arrangement." He held up his hands. "I'm not suggesting there is, but they should understand exactly what assets they have and how they're managed. It protects you as much as them." As much as I hated to admit it, he had a point. The arrangement had grown organically, without formal agreements or clear boundaries. While I had no intention of suddenly cutting off my parents financially, the lack of documentation could create complications. "I suppose we could set up a more formal structure," I conceded. "A trust, maybe." Eric nodded, looking relieved. "That's what I was thinking. I know a good estate attorney in Portland who could help." "I'll consider it," I said, not wanting to commit further until I'd had time to think it through. "But Eric, this stays between us for now. I don't want my parents worrying about technicalities." "Of course," he agreed. "And Rachel, what you did for them, it's remarkable, truly." Coming from Eric, who had always treated me with polite disinterest at best, the compliment caught me off guard. "Thanks," I managed. He hesitated, then added, "Rebecca told me about your conversation this morning, about our separation." I stiffened, unsure where this was going. "She did?" "She said you offered to be there when she tells your parents." He looked down at his hands. "That means a lot to her, more than you probably realize." I was saved from having to respond by the timer on the oven, signaling that dinner was ready. But as we moved to rejoin the others, Eric added quietly, "She's always admired you, you know, even if she never said it." The comment stayed with me throughout dinner, adding another layer to my shifting understanding of my relationship with my twin. How many misconceptions had we built our identities around? How many assumptions had gone unchallenged for decades? After dinner, as everyone settled in the living room, my mother surprised me by sitting down beside me on the sofa. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice low enough that only I could hear, "about what you said last night. About feeling like you were always second best." I braced myself, half expecting a defense or dismissal of my feelings. "I never meant to make you feel that way," she continued. I thought I was helping you by pushing you harder." Rebecca always seemed so naturally confident, so certain of her path. You were more thoughtful, more likely to doubt yourself. I thought you needed the extra push. It was an explanation I hadn't considered, that what I'd interpreted as favoritism had been in her mind a misguided attempt at support. "It didn't feel like help, Mom," I said gently. "It felt like nothing I did was ever enough." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I see that now. I was wrong." She reached for my hand, her fingers cool against mine. "I'm proud of you, Rachel. Not just for the financial help, which is extraordinary, but for the woman you've become. Strong, independent, kind." The words I'd waited a lifetime to hear, delivered so simply, so unexpectedly. For a moment, I couldn't speak around the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I managed finally. "That means a lot." My mother squeezed my hand, then released it. "Your father and I have been talking. We want to understand better what you've done with our investments. Not because we don't trust you," she added quickly, "but because we should know." I nodded, thinking of my conversation with Eric. "I agree. We can set up a meeting with my financial advisor when we get back to Portland. And we want to pay you back," she continued. "For this weekend, for everything." "That's not necessary." "It is," she insisted. "We've been taking advantage of your generosity without even realizing it. That stops now." It was a small thing, perhaps, this acknowledgement of boundaries and responsibility, but it represented a fundamental shift in how my parents saw me, not as the child who needed guidance, but as the adult who deserved respect. Later that night, as Sophia and I prepared for bed, she asked, "How are you feeling about everything?" I considered the question carefully. Cautiously optimistic? It's not fixed, not by a long shot, but it feels like we're at least acknowledging the problems now, which is more than we've ever done before. She smiled, wrapping her arms around me. "I'm proud of you, you know. Standing up for yourself isn't easy, especially with family." I leaned into her embrace, drawing strength from her steadiness. "I couldn't have done it without you. Having you here, knowing I had someone firmly in my corner no matter what, it made all the difference." "Always," she promised. "But Rachel, just remember, they may try, but people don't change overnight. There will be backsliding, old patterns reasserting themselves. Are you prepared for that?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been pondering all day. The tentative steps my family had taken toward better understanding were encouraging, but decades of established dynamics wouldn't disappear with one difficult conversation. "I think so," I said honestly. "I'm not expecting miracles, but now that I've found my voice, I don't think I can go back to silence." The next morning brought a text message that would test that resolution sooner than I'd anticipated. I was sitting on the deck with my coffee, enjoying the early quiet, when my phone chimed with a notification from the investment platform where I managed my parents' retirement fund. "Urgent. Authorization required for fund transfer." I opened the BAO app, frowning at what I saw. Someone had initiated a transfer of $50,000 from the main investment account to an external bank account I didn't recognize. The request had been flagged because it exceeded the automatic approval limit I'd set. Given the timing, it seemed unlikely to be a coincidence. Someone in my family had attempted to access the funds directly, but who? And why? I declined the transfer immediately, then headed inside, my peaceful morning forgotten. My father was in the kitchen making toast. "Dad," I said without preamble, "did you try to transfer money from the investment account this morning?" He looked confused. "No, why would I? I don't even have access to it." "Someone does," I said grimly. "There was an attempted transfer of $50,000. I just blocked it." My father's expression darkened. "That's a serious accusation, Rachel. Who are you suggesting would do such a thing?" Before I could respond, Rebecca entered the kitchen, already dressed for the day. She took one look at our faces and asked, "What's wrong?" I explained the situation briefly, watching both their reactions carefully. My father seemed genuinely surprised and concerned. Rebecca's expression was harder to read. "Could it be some kind of technical error?" she suggested. "Or maybe Mom was trying to access the account and pressed the wrong button." "Mom doesn't have the login credentials either," I pointed out. "Neither do you or Eric. I'm the only one with direct access." An uncomfortable silence fell. The implication hung in the air. Someone had obtained my login information without my knowledge. "Let me check something," I said, pulling out my laptop from my bag. I logged into the investment platform again, this time checking the activity log. What I found made my stomach tighten. Multiple login attempts from an unrecognized device, starting late last night and continuing into the early morning. The location data showed they'd originated from this house. "Someone here tried to access the account repeatedly last night," I said, looking up from the screen. "They finally succeeded around 5 a.m. My father looked genuinely disturbed. "Rachel, I swear it wasn't me. I wouldn't even know how." "I believe you, Dad," I said, because I did. My father was many things, but tech-savvy wasn't one of them. He still wrote checks for most bills and treated online banking with deep suspicion. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe someone's Wi-Fi is overlapping with ours? A neighbor?" That Wouldn't explain how they got my password, I pointed out. And the login attempt started after our conversation last night, after everyone knew about the money. The kitchen door swung open, and Eric walked in, dressed in running clothes and slightly out of breath. "Morning," he said cheerfully, then paused, registering the tension. "What's going on?" I explained the situation again, watching his reaction closely. Unlike my father's open surprise or Rebecca's awkward deflection, Eric's face betrayed nothing, a practiced neutrality that reminded me he was a lawyer accustomed to controlling his expressions. "That's concerning," he said after I finished. "Have you changed your password?" "First thing I did," I confirmed. "And I've enabled additional security measures." He nodded approvingly. "Smart. Any idea who might have done it?" The question hung in the air, accusatory in its innocence. Before I could respond, my mother entered, looking tired but composed. "Did I miss something?" she asked, glancing around at our serious faces. After hearing the explanation, she looked horrified. "Someone tried to steal from you? From the account you set up for us?" "We don't know that it was theft," my father said quickly. "It could have been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated incredulously. "Someone obtained my password without my knowledge, logged into a financial account, and tried to transfer $50,000. What part of that could be a misunderstanding?" No one had an answer for that. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "I'm not going to accuse anyone directly, but this changes things. I can't continue to manage these funds informally if there's a breach of trust." "What are you saying?" my mother asked, alarm clear in her voice. "I'm saying we need to formalize the arrangement immediately. Eric suggested setting up a trust yesterday, and he was right. The money stays where it is, but with proper legal documentation, transparent access for all parties, and clear boundaries." Rebecca nodded slowly. "That seems reasonable." "More than reasonable," my father agreed, his expression grim. "Whoever did this crossed a line." Eric cleared his throat. "I can contact that estate attorney I mentioned as soon as we get back to Portland." I nodded, still watching him carefully. His offer to help could be genuine, or it could be an attempt to control the situation from the inside. At this point, I wasn't sure which. "In the meantime," I continued, "I've temporarily frozen all withdrawals from the account except for the regular monthly stipend. Nothing changes for you day to day," I assured my parents. "But no large transfers will be possible until we have proper legal structures in place." My mother looked like she wanted to protest but thought better of it. "I understand," she said finally. "And Rachel. I'm sorry this happened. You've been so generous, and for someone to try to take advantage." "Let's not jump to conclusions," Eric interrupted smoothly. "As Rachel said, we don't know exactly what happened. It could have been a technical issue, or even a simple mistake." His insistence on this point only deepened my suspicion. A technical issue wouldn't have required my password. A mistake wouldn't have involved multiple login attempts over several hours. "Either way," I said firmly, "this needs to be addressed properly when we get home. For now, let's try to enjoy our last day at the beach." The attempted transfer cast a shadow over the remainder of the weekend. Though we went through the motions of the activities I'd planned, a walk on the beach, a visit to a local art gallery, a seafood dinner at a restaurant overlooking the ocean, there was a new tension underlying every interaction. I found myself watching everyone more carefully, looking for signs of guilt or deception. Was it Eric, with his suspiciously helpful suggestions about formalizing the financial arrangement? Rebecca, who seemed unusually interested in the details of how I managed the investments? My parents themselves deciding they wanted more direct control over the funds than I'd been giving them? The uncertainty was poisonous, threatening to undo the fragile progress we'd made in our family dynamics. By Sunday afternoon, as we packed to leave, The atmosphere had grown so strained that even the children sensed something was wrong, becoming uncharacteristically subdued. As I loaded our bags into Sophia's car, Rebecca approached me, her expression serious. "This isn't how any of us wanted the weekend to end," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "It's not." She hesitated, then said, "I have a confession to make." My heart skipped a beat. Was she about to admit to the attempted transfer? "I was jealous," she continued, "when I heard about what you'd done for Mom and Dad. Not because I begrudged them the security, but because you were able to give them something I couldn't. Financial independence. Freedom from worry." She smiled, sadly. "That was supposed to be my job, you know? The successful doctor taking care of her parents in their old age. But it turns out I can barely take care of myself." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but finding only genuine vulnerability. "Is that why you never offered to help them financially? Because you couldn't do as much as you thought you should?" She nodded, looking ashamed. "I make good money, but between the house, the kids' private school, Eric's spending habits, there's never much left over. And I was too proud to admit it." "Becca," I said gently, "no one expected you to support them entirely. You could have contributed what you could." "I know," she admitted, "but it was easier to just not think about it, to assume they were fine on their retirement savings and Social Security." She met my eyes directly. "I let you carry the entire burden without even realizing it. I'm sorry for that." It was an apology I hadn't expected, addressing an issue I hadn't even fully acknowledged to myself. The resentment I felt wasn't just about my parents' favoritism, but about the inequality of responsibility. How I had stepped up while Rebecca, the golden child, had been allowed to focus solely on her own life. "Thank you for saying that," I said sincerely. "It means a lot." She hesitated, then added, "I want to help now. I can't match what you've done, but I can contribute something each month. It's only fair." "We can talk about that," I agreed. "Once we sort out this other situation." Her expression clouded. "You don't think it was Mom or Dad, do you?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I don't. Dad's technologically challenged and Mom's too straightforward. If she wanted money, she'd just ask." Rebecca nodded, looking relieved. "That's what I thought too." The unspoken implication hung between us. If it wasn't our parents, the suspicious fell on either Eric or Rebecca herself. I searched her face again, wanting to believe my twin wasn't capable of such deception, but also aware of the financial pressures she'd just admitted to. "We'll figure it out," I said finally, "one way or another." As we finished loading the cars and prepared to leave, my parents pulled me aside for a final private word. "This weekend didn't go as planned," my father began. "But I'm glad we came. We needed to have these conversations, difficult as they were." My mother nodded in agreement. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how we've made you feel all these years. I can't change the past, but I want you to know." Her voice caught slightly. "I want you to know that I see you now, Rachel. Really see you. And I'm so very proud of the woman you've become." It was a moment I'd imagined countless times over the years, always dismissing it as an impossible fantasy. Now that it was happening, I found myself uncertain how to respond. Part of me wanted to embrace it fully, to accept this newfound recognition and move forward. But another part, more cautious and scarred by years of disappointment, held back. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." My mother seemed to sense my reservation. "I know words aren't enough. Actions matter more. But I hope you'll give us the chance to show you that we can change." "I will," I promised. "But it goes both ways. I need to be honest with you about how I feel even when it's uncomfortable. No more pretending everything's fine when it isn't." My father nodded solemnly. That's fair, more than fair. As we embraced goodbye, I felt a curious mix of emotions: hope tempered by wariness, optimism shadowed by the unresolved question of who had attempted to access the investment account. The weekend had brought both healing and new complications, leaving me uncertain where things would stand when the dust settled. On the drive back to Portland, Sophia asked, "Do you think it was Eric? Who tried to transfer the money?" I sighed, watching the coastal scenery gradually give way to inland forests. It seems most likely. He was asking suspiciously specific questions about the investments the night before. And if Rebecca's telling the truth about their financial situation, they might be more desperate than they let on. You believe her about that? I considered the question carefully. I do. The vulnerability seemed genuine, and it fits with some things I've observed. The way they always take expensive vacations, but she wears the same clothes for years. How their house is impressive, but their cars are older models. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. Living beyond their means to keep up appearances. Exactly. A very Chen family trait, I added with a wry smile. As Portland's skyline appeared in the distance, I felt my shoulders relax slightly. Returning to our normal life, our apartment, our routines, our chosen family of friends, would provide perspective on the emotional roller coaster of the weekend. Whatever happens with your family, Sophia said, reaching for my hand across the console, we'll handle it together. I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her unwavering support. I know, and that makes all the difference. My phone chimed with a text message. It was from Rebecca. Call me when you get home. We need to talk about Eric. I showed the message to Sophia, whose eyebrows raised. Sounds like you might get some answers sooner rather than later. Maybe, I agreed, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Whatever Rebecca wanted to discuss about her husband, I suspected it would only complicate our already tangled family dynamics further. But as we crossed the bridge into downtown Portland, I realized that I felt ready for whatever came next. The revelations of the weekend had shifted something fundamental in me. A newfound certainty in my own worth, independent of my family's validation. Whatever storms lay ahead, I would weather them, not as the perpetually overlooked twin, but as Rachel Chen, on my own terms. Rebecca's house in West Linn felt different as I pulled into the driveway. The immaculate Tudor-style home with its perfect landscaping had always seemed to embody the gulf between our lives, her conventional success versus my unconventional choices. Today, though, it was just a house, beautiful but burdened with the weight of appearances. The front door opened before I could ring the bell, Rebecca appearing with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of her usual polished style. She wore jeans and a faded Stanford sweatshirt. My sweatshirt, I realized, the same one she'd been wearing at the beach house. The kids are at a play date, she said by way of greeting, leading me into the kitchen where 2 mugs of coffee waited. I figured we needed privacy for this conversation. The kitchen, like the rest of the house, had always been showcased in glossy perfection during family gatherings. Granite countertops gleaming, copper pots hanging just so, fresh flowers arranged in artful displays. Today, unwashed dishes sat. In the sink, mail was scattered across the island, and the flowers in the center vase had wilted days ago. You okay? I asked, taking a seat at the breakfast nook. Rebecca pushed a mug toward me. Depends on your definition of okay. I haven't slept properly in days. The kids keep asking when Daddy's coming home. Mom's called 6 times since yesterday, alternating between checking if I'm coping and suggesting marriage counselors. I winced. That sounds exhausting. It is. She took a long sip of her coffee. But in a strange way, it's also liberating. The secret's out. The perfect marriage, the perfect family. The facade is finally down. I recognized the complex relief in her voice, the same feeling I'd experienced after revealing the truth about the investment account. It's hard to keep up appearances, I agreed. Exhausting, actually. Rebecca nodded, her gaze drifting to the window where rain had started to fall, tapping gently against the glass. I've been thinking a lot about why I stayed with Eric so long, even when things weren't working. And I keep coming back to Mom and Dad, to this idea that failure wasn't an option, that I had to maintain this image of success at all costs. The golden child syndrome, I suggested gently. Exactly. I was so afraid of disappointing them, of losing their approval. She looked at me then, a flash of understanding in her eyes. Which is exactly how you felt your entire life, isn't it? Like nothing you did was ever enough? I nodded, surprised by her insight. Pretty much. I'm sorry, Rachel. I really am. I was so caught up in my own performance that I never realized what it was costing you. You don't need to apologize. I do, she interrupted firmly. I was complicit in how they treated you. Maybe not deliberately, but through my silence, my acceptance of the status quo. I should have seen it sooner. The acknowledgement meant more than I could express. For years, I'd wondered if Rebecca even noticed the difference in how we were treated, or if her privileged position had blinded her to my experience. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the steady rhythm of rain providing a soothing backdrop. So what now? I asked finally. With Eric? With the divorce? Rebecca sighed, pushing her mug away. We met with mediators yesterday. We're trying to keep it amicable for the kids' sake. Eric has agreed to move his things out this weekend while the children are at Mom and Dad's. And the gambling? He claims he's getting help, going back to therapy. I want to believe him for the kids' sake, but... She shrugged. Fool me twice, you know? I nodded, understanding. And financially, will you be okay? It was a question I would never have asked before, a boundary I wouldn't have crossed. But our relationship was shifting, the old rules no longer applying. Eventually, she said, the house will have to be sold. I'll need to find something smaller, more manageable, and I might have to ask for help in the short term. The implication hung between us. I'd been helping our parents financially for years. Would I now do the same for my sister? Whatever you need, I said without hesitation. We'll figure it out. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by naked relief. I hate asking. You're not asking. I'm offering. That's what family does. Real family, not the performative version we grew up with. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in days. When did you get so wise? Around the same time I stopped caring what other people think of my choices, I answered, echoing our conversation from earlier in the week. It's remarkably clarifying. I'd like to try that, she admitted, not caring so much about appearances. It gets easier with practice. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her expression growing more serious. There's something else I wanted to talk to you about. The dinner at Mom and Dad's. Are you still going? I hesitated. After everything that had happened, the prospect of a quiet dinner with my parents felt fraught with potential complications. I'm not sure. Mom hasn't confirmed since everything with Eric came out. She will, Rebecca said with certainty. In fact, she called this morning to ask if I thought you'd still come. She sounded nervous, Rachel. I don't think I've ever heard Mom sound nervous before. This piqued my curiosity. Nervous about what? It's just dinner. Rebecca shook her head. I don't think it's just anything. They've been talking about how to make things right with you, how to show they understand what you've been trying to tell them for years. And you know this how? I asked, skeptical. Because Dad called me yesterday, asking for advice. She smiled at my evident surprise. I know, it shocked me too. Dad? asking for my input on an emotional matter, but he genuinely wants to get this right. I wasn't sure what to make of this information. My parents' sudden interest in understanding my perspective felt both hopeful and suspicious, like a gift that might have strings attached. "I'm not looking for a grand gesture," I said carefully. "I just want them to see me clearly, to respect my choices even when they're different from what they would choose." "I think they're starting to," Rebecca offered. "In their own way, at their own pace. The question is whether you're willing to meet them where they are." It was a fair question, one that cut to the heart of the matter. Was I willing to accept imperfect progress, steps in the right direction, even if they fell short of complete understanding? Or was I holding on to resentment, waiting for a perfect acknowledgement that might never come? "I want to try," I admitted. "I'm just afraid of falling back into old patterns, all of us, not just them." Rebecca reached across the table, taking my hand. "Then we don't let that happen. We hold each other accountable, remind each other when we're slipping. Together." The simplicity of her suggestion, the solidarity it implied, moved me unexpectedly. "Together," I agreed, squeezing her hand. As I drove back to Portland, our conversation replayed in my mind. The prospect of rebuilding relationships with my family, not as the overlooked twin seeking validation, but as an equal participant, setting healthy boundaries, felt both daunting and exhilarating. Sophia was waiting when I arrived home, her expression curious. "How was Rebecca?" "Better than expected," I said, settling beside her on the couch. "More insightful, more authentic, I guess. Like she's finally letting go of the perfect image she's maintained all these years." "And the dinner with your parents? Are we still on for that?" I nodded slowly. "I think so. Rebecca seems to think they're genuinely trying to make amends." "Do you believe that?" Sophia asked, her tone neutral but her eyes searching. "I want to," I admitted. "But I'm also trying to be realistic. They're not going to transform overnight into the perfectly supportive, validating parents I always wanted. But maybe they can be better? Maybe we all can." She smiled, tucking her legs beneath her. "That sounds like healthy expectation setting to me." "I'm trying," I said with a laugh. "It's a work in progress." The confirmation came later that evening, a text from my mother asking if Saturday at 6 still worked for dinner. I replied with a simple affirmative, adding that Sophia and I were looking forward to it. Her response came immediately. "We are too. More than you know." The days leading up to the dinner passed in a blur of work obligations and preparations for formalizing the retirement fund arrangements. I'd scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor specializing in trust management, determined to create transparent structures that would protect everyone involved. Mark continued to express skepticism about my parents' sudden change of heart. "People don't transform that quickly," he insisted over lunch. "Especially not after decades of established patterns." "I'm not expecting transformation," I clarified. "Just evolution. Small steps in the right direction." He looked unconvinced but supportive. "Just guard your heart. That's all I'm saying. Hope for the best, prepare for the usual." His caution was reasonable, but as Saturday approached, I found myself genuinely looking forward to the dinner, curious about what my parents had planned, open to the possibility of real connection. When the day arrived, Sophia and I spent extra time getting ready, both of us feeling a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. "It's just dinner," Sophia reminded me as we drove to my parents' house in Lake Oswego. "We can leave any time if it gets uncomfortable." "I know," I assured her. But we both understood that this wasn't just any dinner. It represented a potential turning point in my relationship with my parents, a chance to establish new patterns or reinforce old wounds. The house looked the same as always, a tasteful colonial with meticulously maintained gardens. But as we approached the front door, I noticed something unexpected. A new doormat reading "Welcome" in flowing script, replacing the formal monogrammed one that had been there for years. A small change, perhaps meaningless, but somehow symbolic. My mother answered the door wearing a casual outfit instead of her usual dinner party attire, dark jeans and a simple blue sweater that I'd never seen before. "You're here," she said, embracing me with unexpected warmth before turning to Sophia. "And Sophia, thank you so much for coming. We're so glad to have you both." The formal living room that had intimidated guests for decades had been transformed. The stiff antique furniture was gone, replaced by comfortable-looking contemporary pieces arranged to encourage conversation rather than formal separation. Family photos covered the walls, not just the carefully curated selections of Rebecca's achievements that had dominated for years, but a genuine mix of images from throughout our lives. I stopped in front of one particular photo, me at my college, graduation, beaming at the camera with my diploma in hand. I'd never seen this picture displayed before, had assumed it was tucked away in an album somewhere, deemed less important than Rebecca's medical school graduation that had occupied a prominent place on the mantle for years. "We've been going through old photos," my father explained, appearing beside me. "Found a lot of moments we should have celebrated more at the time." The acknowledgement, subtle but meaningful, caught me off guard. "It's nice to see them out." He nodded, his expression softer than usual. Overdue, I'd say. Dinner was another surprise. Not the formal dining room with its intimidating table settings and rigid atmosphere, but a casual meal in the renovated kitchen, served family style at the center island. My mother had indeed made my favorite, eggplant dish, along with several other foods I'd loved growing up, but that rarely made appearances at family gatherings. "This is wonderful," Sophia said, genuinely impressed as she sampled the food. "Did you make all this yourself?" My mother nodded, looking pleased. "I found some old recipes I'd forgotten about, things Rachel used to love as a child." The conversation flowed more easily than I'd anticipated, focusing on neutral topics at first, neighborhood news, a book my father had recently read, a show Sophia and I had been watching, the usual interrogation about my career choices, and life decisions was notably absent, replaced by genuine questions about what I enjoyed about my work, what challenges I found interesting. It wasn't until we'd moved to coffee and dessert that my parents exchanged a glance, a silent communication that signaled a shift in the evening's purpose. "Rachel," my father began, his voice more tentative than I'd ever heard it. "Your mother, and I wanted to have you over tonight for a specific reason. Here it comes," I thought, bracing myself for whatever agenda they might reveal. My mother reached across the counter, not quite touching my hand, but gesturing toward it. "We've been doing a lot of thinking since the beach trip, about how we've treated you over the years, about the favorites we've played, the pressures we've put on both you and Rebecca. We got it wrong," my father said simply. "We pushed Rebecca to be perfect, burdening her with expectations no one could fulfill. And we failed to see you clearly, to recognize your strengths and support your choices." The directness of the acknowledgement left me momentarily speechless. I'd anticipated hints or partial admissions, not this straightforward acceptance of responsibility. "We can't change the past," my mother continued, her voice trembling slightly. "But we'd like to do better moving forward, if you'll let us." Sophia's hand found mine under the counter, a silent reminder of her support. "What does doing better look like to you?" I asked. Not challenging, but genuinely curious about their understanding. They exchanged another glance before my father answered. "It means listening more and judging less. Respecting your choices even when they're different from what we might choose. Recognizing that both you and Rebecca are adults with your own paths to follow, not extensions of our expectations. And it means treating Sophia as an important part of our family," my mother added, looking directly at my partner. "Which she is." The words were right, almost surprisingly so, as if they'd been researching how to repair damaged parent-child relationships. But I needed more than words. I needed to know this wasn't just a temporary reaction to recent revelations. I appreciate hearing that, I said carefully. Really, I do. But I'm curious what prompted this change. Is it because of the investment account? Because you found out I've been supporting your retirement? My father shook his head firmly. It's not about the money, Rachel. Though that revelation did force us to see you differently, to recognize strengths we'd been blind to. It's about almost losing you, my mother said quietly. When you walked out at the beach house, when you told us you were done with the family, I saw in that moment what our behavior had cost us, was still costing us. I remembered my ultimatum, the moment when I'd finally reached my breaking point after years of diminishment. I meant it, you know. I was prepared to walk away if nothing changed. We know, my father acknowledged. That's why we're trying so hard now. Not because we feel obligated due to financial support, but because we don't want to lose our daughter. It was the most vulnerable I'd ever seen my parents. Their carefully maintained facade of certainty and authority replaced by genuine emotion, by the humility of people who recognized their mistakes and wanted to make amends. I want that too, I admitted, my voice thick with unexpected emotion. To have a real relationship, not one built on comparisons or expectations. That's what we want to build, my mother said, tears gathering in her eyes. If you'll give us the chance. The cynical part of me wanted to question their sincerity, to look for hidden agendas or temporary performances, but the evidence of effort surrounded us. The renovated living room with its inclusive family photos, the carefully prepared meal of my favorite foods, the genuine attempt to include Sophia in the conversation. I'd like to try, I said finally. With one condition. Anything, my father said immediately. Rebecca needs to be part of this too. She's going through a difficult time, and she needs parents who support her unconditionally, not just when she's meeting expectations. My mother nodded vigorously. We've spoken with her already, several times actually. We're trying to be there for her without judgment, though I'll admit it's challenging sometimes. Old habits. At least you're aware of it, I acknowledged. That's the first step. As the evening wound down, my father disappeared briefly, returning with a small wooden box. There's something else we wanted to give you, he said, placing it on the counter before me. I opened it carefully to find a silver bracelet nestled. Inside, delicate links interspersed with small amber stones that caught the light. It was your grandmother's, my mother explained. My mother's. She always said it should go to you because the amber matched your eyes. I lifted it carefully, remembering my grandmother who had passed when I was in college. She had been the one family member who never compared me to Rebecca, who seemed to value my differences rather than trying to reshape me. I never knew she said that, I admitted, slipping it onto my wrist. There's a lot we haven't shared, my father said. Stories, family history, insights that got lost in our focus on achievements and appearances. We'd like to change that, too. As Sophia and I prepared to leave, my parents walked us to the door, the goodbye lacking the usual relief that signaled the end of obligatory family time. Instead, there was a warmth, a reluctance to see the evening end. Next time, we'd like to come to your place, my mother suggested. See where you live, get a better sense of your life in Portland. The invitation to enter my space, to see me in my natural environment, rather than expecting me to adapt to theirs, felt significant. I'd like that, I agreed. Maybe in a few weeks, once things settle with Rebecca and the new trust arrangements are in place. My father nodded approval. Take whatever time you need. We're not going anywhere. The drive back to Portland was quiet, both Sophia and I processing the unexpected authenticity of the evening. They really are trying, Sophia observed finally. I wasn't sure I believed it, but seeing them tonight, that wasn't for show. No, I agreed. It wasn't. They're actually listening, actually reflecting. I'm not sure I've ever seen that before. So what happens now? I considered the question, watching the city lights emerge as we approached Portland. Now we move forward, I guess. Cautiously, realistically. We build something new. The next morning, I woke early, drawn to the balcony with my coffee despite the chill in the air. The city was quiet, the early Sunday light casting everything in a gentle glow. I twisted my grandmother's bracelet on my wrist, the weight of it still unfamiliar but comforting. My phone chimed with a text notification. Rebecca. Heard dinner went well. Happy for you. Coffee later this week? I smiled, typing a quick affirmative response. Another chime followed, this one from my mother. Thank you for last night. It meant more than you know. As I stood there, watching Portland come alive beneath me, I thought about the strange journey of the past 2 weeks. From the revelation at the beach house to the attempted theft, from painful confrontations to tentative reconciliations. Nothing was fully resolved. The path forward would undoubtedly include missteps and old habits resurfacing. But something fundamental had shifted, not just in my family's perception of me, but in my perception of myself. For years, I had defined myself in relation to Rebecca, the less successful twin, the overlooked daughter, the one who never quite measured up. I had allowed my family's comparative framework to shape my self-image, seeking validation that never quite came. Now, standing on my own balcony in the life I had built for myself, I realized that framework had always been flawed. My worth wasn't relative to Rebecca's, wasn't dependent on my parents' approval, wasn't linked to conventional markers of success. It was inherent, absolute, defined by values and choices that were authentically mine. The investments I had made in my career, in my relationship with Sophia, in supporting my parents' retirement, even in confronting painful family dynamics, all reflected a person of integrity, generosity, and courage. A person worthy of respect, not despite being different from Rebecca, but because of being uniquely myself. That realization, more than any acknowledgement from my family, felt like the true transformation. Whatever happened next, whether my parents' efforts at change proved lasting, whether Rebecca and I continued to build a healthier relationship, whether the new financial arrangements worked smoothly, I would approach it from a place of self-knowledge and strength. The bracelet caught the morning light, amber stones glowing gold against my skin. My grandmother had seen me clearly, had valued me for exactly who I was. Perhaps in their own way, my parents were finally beginning to do the same. But more importantly, I was seeing myself clearly now, investing in my own worth without needing external validation to confirm it. And that, I realized as the sun rose fully over Portland, was the most valuable return of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.